There's a wild new rumor about the Pelicans trading up into the top 3 of the draft, but it's not for who you think. We're going to break it down in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Monday. We got a lot of shows this week, and we are going to be covering the draft. We're going to get into Joe Dumars a little bit later in the week as well. You're not going to want to miss anything on Locked On Pelicans here. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And if you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Oh boy, this was not the show that I thought I was going to be doing today. A new, pretty wild rumor, in my opinion, that's making the rounds. And this comes from Kevin O'Connor on the Kevin O'Connor Show with Yahoo. Talking about the draft, by the way, one of his guests on that show, Rafael Barlow of Locked On NBA Big Board, just throwing that out there. The Pelicans could be interested in trading up to 3 or 4 Philadelphia 76ers or the Charlotte Hornets to draft Ace Bailey. Here's the quote from Kevin O'Connor. Quote, I've heard the Pelicans at number 7 like Ace Bailey. Joe Dumars there. Sounds like he really likes Ace Bailey. Could try to trade up to number 3 to Philly or number 4 with Charlotte. That to me is the best case scenario for the Sixers. You trade down from 3 to 7. New Orleans gets their guy, and you can probably still get Malawach. I don't know if Trey Johnson would be there at 7, but Malawach, I don't see it at 4 or 5. Oh boy, that one's spicy. Like if we're grading this one, like that rumor, truthfully, is probably like an 8.5, 9 on like a scale of 1 to 10 of like how kind of wild that one is to me. I'm not the biggest Ace Bailey guy, and Kevin O'Connor on his show was saying he's not the biggest Ace Bailey guy either, and Rafael Barlow's not the biggest Ace Bailey guy. Ace Bailey is one of the more polarizing prospects in the draft, and when you look at him and you know how he played in his lone season at Rutgers, you know, there's a lot to like, but then there's a lot of things that do concern you. He came in much shorter than what we had thought, coming in at 6'7", 6'8". Wingspan is good at 7'1" for, you know, a forward, a kind of wing, but more of a power forward here. And this was a guy who in college is just a ridiculous shot maker, a mid-range assassin of the highest order, capable of scoring over anyone and like through anyone, contested, uncontested, all of those things. He can just make shots basically from everywhere on the court. And there's something to be said for a player that can go out and do that. Very raw, not consistent, not a good defender, more on that in a second here, but someone who does have a lot of upside, in my opinion. He's a very good athlete too. 17.6 points per game, 34.6% from 3, 7.2 rebounds per game. Just very good size. And as a pull-up shooter, this dude, frankly, is elite at it, right? He can hit shots going to his left, going to his right, fade away, just drive, stop, pull up, shoot, all of those. He has a lot of confidence in his ability to shoot. Simple as that. At times inconsistent, but when you look at a lot of his mechanics, it does look pretty good. I'm trying to pull up another stat here. That's not helpful. I don't know why my computer did that. Hold on. There we go. This really, really wants to be difficult. All right, there we go. Ace Bailey's stats. That's what I wanted to look up. One of the things that concerns me is the free throw percentage. 69.2% is not an elite number. The 34% from three is not an elite number either, right? Those are some of the biggest concerns about him. The shot selection is also a big concern when it comes to him. Mid-range. Now, look, make shots, score, and you heard Joe Dumars talking about, well, we're not going to try, we're just going to try and win games, which again, results are what matters here. And I like that idea. But at a certain point, you also do need to kind of play to the modern NBA, right? When you look at the Pacers coming back to beat the Oklahoma City Thunder in game one, they did it behind the three ball. It was their guys hitting threes. It was their power forward in Obi Toppin splashing threes. Their center in Miles Turner splashing threes. Frankly, what's kind of wild is Tyrese Halliburton hitting that game winner didn't do anything to kind of help the comeback. He just happened to hit the game winner here. So Bailey has the ability to make shots. That's great, but and very good athleticism, and you can use him in a variety of different ways, and he does have a pretty high work rate. All of that's a really good thing. So if he's there at 7, yeah, take him. But trading up to get that guy concerns me because you're going to probably need to give up somewhat significant assets to do that. I would not trade the 7th pick, the future Indiana Pacers pick next year, to go to number 3 to draft Ace Bailey, right? If Dylan Harper's there, absolutely. More on him in a little bit. But for Ace Bailey, no. And we're going to get into this debate a little bit later in the show of drafting for fit, drafting best player available, drafting need, all of those things, right? Best player available and going with the guy with the highest ceiling is important, and I'll explain why a little bit later in today's show. I think you do that when that guy falls to you. So if you're at 7 and Ace Bailey's there, and yeah, his ceiling's higher than probably anyone else you could take in that range, absolutely draft him at 7. But giving up other assets to go and get him, no. And then there's the Zion factor. Now, this quote, if you're an everydayer, you've heard me say this before. Last season I talked to someone with the team talking about Ace Bailey and his fit next to Zion Williamson, and that person straight up said, there is no fit. There is no fit. They don't fit well together because we have just seen it. We saw Ace Bailey's fit next to Zion Williamson with Brandon Ingram, and that just really didn't work. The shot selection with Ace Bailey is basically the same thing as Brandon Ingram. Wants to be a mid-range guy. That's where he's comfortable with. And sure, again, make your shots, go and score, but you do need to shoot threes in the modern NBA, and court spacing is a really important thing. And Ace Bailey, maybe he does that, right? Maybe he brings that eventually to the team, but I am concerned that you're going to just get this guy, not going to fit next to Zion, and then you've kind of just blown next year, essentially, in some capacity around that. Again, hold that thought to the third segment because there is something kind of interesting when thinking about that too. So again, if he's there at 7, absolutely draft Ace Bailey. Trading up, I don't get that one. One of the things we're going to talk about in the next segment, and this is how I'll transition to it, is you see how important creation is in these NBA playoffs, how important it is creating for others, creating for yourself, but really creating for others at times. At the NBA level, you're seeing it in the playoffs. Look at what Tyrese Halliburton does to open up shot opportunities for teammates. Look at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who opens up shots for his teammates. Those are really important things. I don't really see Ace Bailey as that elite creator for this Pelicans team, or really just in the NBA, right? Part of it is also, he does get some tunnel vision where he's just, I'm dribbling, I'm going to shoot now, and he's going to focus on that and not look for others. And his handle's kind of loose, so, I don't think he is the best one to be able to kind of drive, kick, do some of that stuff. This just doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Again, if he's there at 7, take him. You will hear me rave about the pick if Ace Bailey is the 7th overall pick to New Orleans. But trading up to go in and get him and giving up future assets or additional assets, that does concern me I think, and not something that I love. I don't know, how much truth there is to this rumor. I don't know where Kevin O'Connor got this from. He's someone I trust. He's someone I very much enjoy his work, particularly with the draft. So I don't doubt that he's connected in hearing this in some capacity, but I would not trade up for Ace Bailey. Would you? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments down below. Let's get into elite guard play, creation, all of that. Some of the stuff we just talked about here in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. That is coming up next. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's really easy to lose track, and that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. So you can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop managing your money and you start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. And managing money with your partner, smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And if you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. For your second listen today, check out the Locked On NBA Big Board Show. NBA draft expert Rafael Barlow reacts to every workout, interview, and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. Find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. So I want to get into something that I think is very clearly a lesson that we're learning at the NBA level right now, and something that you've seen in the playoffs here. There's a couple. We've talked about one of them, which is you need not a random assortment of big men, but you just need a variety of big men that do different things to be able to, counter or force opponents to counter you at the playoff level and even during the regular season. That's why I'm high on someone like Maxime Reynaud and Thomas Sorber, because I think they can do a lot of things that you don't have here on this team, and they're different bigs themselves. That's why, if you didn't listen to Friday's show, you should, where I talked about trading down and maybe being able to get a guard and a big in this draft rather than just sitting at 7 and taking kind of what's there. Like, kind of go and make it work for you a little bit more. And especially because it does feel from people I've talked to around the league that you'll be able to get more in this draft by trading down than you would in another draft. That kind of goes into why I would also be concerned about trading up. It sounds like this is a draft where you're going to need to give up more to trade up because a lot of teams really want to try and do it. So that's making someone like Ace Bailey or whoever you take it 3, 4, whatever it is, more expensive to do. And I don't love that idea at all. So trading down, getting 2 picks, maybe one in the lottery, one in the 20s, I think you can still get a guard that you like or a wing, a player that you like, and then add some more depth. And we'll do another show on this probably later this week. Depth is going to be a really important thing for New Orleans this season, and I think they're kind of lacking it right now. I don't particularly think this is an incredibly deep team that's going to beat you with depth like it was a couple of years ago. So trading down, to me, makes a lot of sense when it comes to that. One of the other lessons, though, that you're seeing, and I just talked about it a little bit in the last segment, is elite guard play is driving the league right now. It feels like it's a bit of a guards league at this point in time. It's shifting a little bit more to bigs, I think. But overall, you need elite guard play to try and lead you to championships. It's just kind of the way it's going right now. When you look at players that are, you would call offensive engines for the team, it's guards. And Zion can be an offensive engine, is an offensive engine too. But you need guard play too. And I think in terms of elite dynamic guard play, the Pelicans are lacking it. CJ's good. He can score. He can do that. We saw him put up a 50-point game this season. You have DeJounte Murray, who will come back, right? He's going to play again this season. So they have good guard play, but I wouldn't necessarily call either of those guys like elite offensive engines. Maybe if you combined them into one, that would kind of do it. And they can play off of each other and play off of Zion really well too. So, a couple of years ago, I talked about kind of building a point guard of committee that if you looked at Zion as like 0.75% or 0.75, so 75% of a point guard, you have CJ who's half a point guard, and that, ends up adding to a point guard, and you can kind of get there that way. I'd rather just get an elite lead guard for the team that can do what you need to do, and you don't need to do it in a piecemeal way. And so staying at 7, seems like you can potentially get that guy, whether it is Jeremiah Fears, whether it's Trey Johnson. I think both of those guys can do it. Frankly, I look at Trey Johnson, more favorably than I used to do it, partially because the size comparison is pretty good to Ace Bailey, actually. His wingspan is 6'11". Ace Bailey's is 7'1". That's basically right there. The height is about 2 inches too. So there is that ability is what, kind of, they're comparable even though they play different positions, just because Ace Bailey came in measured shorter than what we were thinking. But when you look at Trey Johnson, who, was basically averaging 20 points per game in the SEC, the toughest conference this year. They produced, I think, the most tournament teams ever. Now, you're also in a period of time where conferences are bigger than they were ever before, but there's still something sane for them. He's playing against elite competition all season long, and he thrived. 40% from 3, 87% from the free throw line. I think he is a better point guard type guy, shot creation machine than Ace Bailey can be, and you see it. There is a lot more selflessness to his game than I thought there was before, and so I really think that this is the type of guy that could really develop more into a point guard. He'd certainly be coming into the league as a 2 guard. Defense is going to be a problem for him, and how is that going to go with head coach who's staying, Willie Green? I'm not entirely sure, but for someone who works well off ball, is an elite shooter, can maybe show some lead guard tendencies, stay at 7 and just draft Trey Johnson. I don't think he'll be there at 7. I think he's going to go 5 or 6, it seems like. But if he's not there, that's okay. That's where someone like Jeremiah Fears can come in and do a lot of the same. Different size, different ability. But again, as a 17-year-old, 18-year-old in the SEC, averaging 17.1 points per game is pretty incredible. And as a downhill attacker that really opens things up, that's a fantastic thing that you absolutely need at the NBA level. He's less of a proven shooter than Trey Johnson is, less of a proven shooter than even Ace Bailey is. And, that's going to kind of be what makes or breaks him at the NBA level. He does not have elite size. He's not a fantastic finisher around the rim either. But this is a dude who has just done good things and has so much upside, in my opinion, that you've really got to consider him. And, that's, I think, one of the reasons why you're seeing him really start to kind of improve his draft position and his draft stock and be one of those risers. He's going to be a very good playmaker. He's got a very good handle, in my opinion, and the athleticism is pretty good too. You just hope that the shooting numbers are really what's going to step up. And if you believe in that, maybe we would be talking differently about this if Fred Vinson was still on the team. You'd feel really good about that. I just don't want to trade up for Ace Bailey when it feels like you could get Trey Johnson or Jeremiah Fears, at 7. Maybe not, right? You could see Trey Johnson going 5. I could absolutely see Jeremiah Fears going 6 to the Wizards. That's kind of leaving you with Conkin Nipple there at 7, but that's maybe then when you look to trade down and maybe just take best player available, which, hey, that's actually a pretty good way to look at this. Good way to segue to what I want to talk about in the next segment. I've talked a lot about fit in today's show, right? Because this team is trying to compete next year around Zion. I don't think Ace Bailey fits next to Zion. I see a need for a guard, but maybe you just need to go best player available, highest upside, and maybe that's not one of those guys. Maybe it's someone else that we haven't talked about at this point in time. Maybe it's a Cedric Coward, right? Maybe it's a Cayman Malawatch. I think those are all very realistic options here. Let's look at that and kind of discuss how that kind of works. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by DoorDash. NBA fans, the finals are here, and that means big performances and even bigger rewards. And Dash Pass is bringing the heat with a slam dunk deal for Dash Pass members during the 2025 NBA playoffs. It's called They Swoosh, You Score. Anytime a player drops 50 or more points in a playoff game, Dash Pass members score a free 3-piece crispy tender combo from Wingstop the very next day. Just place an order of $20 or more, use code WINGSTOP50 at checkout, and that combo is yours. Crispy, delicious, totally free. Offer valid noon to midnight the day after the game. Terms apply. Look, you ever order food in and you look at it and it's like, why is this so expensive? Because of all the fees and things like that. But with Dash Pass, you get $0 delivery fees and exclusive perks like this one. So sign up for Dash Pass to unlock this and more exclusive deals all finals long. When any player scores 50 plus in a finals game, Dash Pass members can grab a free 3-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the next day with a $20 or more order and code WINGSTOP50. That's Dash Pass, your door to more savings, more flavor, and more ways to win. Terms apply. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. For your second listen today, Locked On Saints with host Ross Jackson, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. He's making sense of everything black and gold. What's Tyler Shook going to look like when it comes to preseason, training camp, all of that. Ross Jackson's covering everything black and gold over at the Locked On Saints podcast. Make them your second listen today. So we just talked a lot about fit, need, and I see some fit problems, needs for the Pelicans, but is it better to just go with best player available? And truthfully, the answer to that is yes, particularly at 7. Go with the guy you think is the highest upside. Don't worry about fit. Don't worry about need. You know, when you think about how quickly rosters change over in an NBA team, you know, unless you're a team like the Celtics or the Thunder where you're kind of done doing this a little bit differently, you're turning over a lot of your roster regularly. And so if that's going to be the case, don't worry about fit next to those guys if they're only going to be on the team for a season or two and you're trying to plan for a 5-year window. And I think that's something that's worth keeping in mind when I look at some of the guard play here. And it's like, no, you need a guard, but if an elite guard isn't available, take someone else and don't basically force it. You know, with Ace Bailey, you know, if he's there at 7, take him. There's no fit with Zion, in my opinion, or not much of one. Maybe there would be, but it doesn't appear to be so. But if he's there at 7, just take him. And then if your season goes sideways, you can pivot. You could trade Zion. You could release him later, whatever it might be. And then at that point in time, you still have your high upside guy, and now you can build around that player. That's worth keeping in mind when it comes to the draft, I think. Sometimes even I lose sight of that. You know, I also think the Pelicans are trying to kind of look at a little bit of two timelines, which I don't always think is great, right? You know, they're trying to compete next season. They don't want to go through a rebuild. Look, they want to win. There's nothing wrong with wanting to win. And so they're going to go for it. And the problem with that is, like, great, do it. But if it doesn't work out, you do need to be able to pivot then at that point in time. But also then, what is the highest priority here? Is it to win next year or is it to think long term? And so maybe because of that, you're going with the guy that you feel is just more NBA ready or has a higher floor but lower ceiling. That's what makes this so interesting for the Pelicans right now. You know, if you had just pivoted to a rebuild, and they're not doing that, let's be clear, you could do whatever you want in the draft. Now, if you're not doing that, it does make me wonder if you can do whatever you want in the draft, or do you need to try and maximize this next season as much as possible because it does feel so pivotal. And I'm tired of every year being the most pivotal year for the New Orleans Pelicans, but that's just kind of how it's been in the Zion era. So, you know, does that impact how you draft? It shouldn't, right? It shouldn't impact your draft strategy, the players you're looking at and all of that. But realistically, it might. And I think that's something that the Pelicans are going to need to be able to, they're going to need to be able to manage that and the expectations that come with wanting to compete next season. If you weren't building around Zion, you could do this differently. But if you are, then you do need to worry a little bit about fit. If it's like, we're still committed to Zion, we're not planning on getting rid of him, like he's our guy going forward. Like, you do need to think about fit a little bit more so than, say, a team like the Washington Wizards who, like, I don't know what we got here. We got to kind of figure it out. Or the Utah Jazz, right? Like, that's kind of what it is. That's why everyone's questioning Dylan Harper at 2 to the San Antonio Spurs, because that doesn't really make sense with the group of guys that they have there, right? Cooper Flagg makes a ton of sense. When you look at the Charlotte Hornets, like, are they interested in Ace Bailey if he's there? Because you have Brandon Miller and some of the other players? Like, I'm not entirely sure. So that's what makes this so interesting. That's why everyone's putting VJ Edgecombe to the Charlotte Hornets, because that pick makes a ton of sense for them. The fit there, the need there makes an absolute ton of sense. But they could go in any direction and, potentially be okay. I don't know if New Orleans can do that given the way that they're kind of built and what their, ultimate goals are for next season. That's what makes this draft kind of interesting. We're going to get a pretty good idea of how this Pelicans front office thinks and what they also think about the future when it comes to how they're going to end up drafting during, the upcoming NBA draft, which is going to be here before you know it. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. I appreciate you all listening so much. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. More on Joe Dumars. Interesting thought that came up, talking with someone. That's coming up here later in the week. See y'all next time.